The sound came sharp, deliberate, and far louder than the knock of any friendly neighbor. 3 heavy thuds, they rattled the wooden frame of the Morton family's front door, the kind of pounding that makes your heart jolt before your mind even has time to catch up. Inside, in her spotless kitchen, Danielle Morton froze. A 42-year-old black woman with her hair tied in a bun, she still held a dish towel in her hand. Dinner was simmering on the stove, her teenage daughter upstairs finishing homework, her son scrolling his phone on the couch. Everything about the house was normal, until that knock. Through the narrow glass panel beside the door, she saw them, 2 police officers in uniform. One stood tall, hand resting close to his duty belt. The other shifted nervously, scanning the porch. Her first thought wasn't fear. It was confusion. Why would police be at her door in the middle of the afternoon? The HOA sent letters, sure. But cops? Over what? Danielle opened the door just a few inches, stepping into the frame. "Good afternoon, officers," she said, keeping her tone polite but firm. "Can I help you with something?" The taller officer adjusted his cap. "Ma'am, we received a call from your homeowners association. They reported a violation, and a possible confrontation. We need to ask you a few questions." Danielle blinked. "A confrontation? With who? I've been home all day." The younger officer spoke, almost apologetically. "They said you refused to comply with HOA rules regarding decorations on your property." Danielle let out a short laugh. Not amused, just incredulous. She stepped aside so they could see. On the porch fluttered a bright, cheerful sunflower flag. Nothing political, nothing offensive. Just yellow petals against a blue sky. "You're here because of that?" she asked, pointing. The silence that followed was heavier than the knock had been. And in that silence, Danielle felt it, the weight of a word that had already been written into the report, long before she opened the door. Hostile. A word that followed black bodies like a shadow. A word that could turn fabric into a threat, or dinner into danger. A word powerful enough to summon police to a quiet suburban street in Tempe, Arizona. And Danielle knew, this wasn't just about a sunflower. 3 days earlier, the problem had arrived not with pounding fists on the door, but with a neatly folded white envelope. Danielle remembered it clearly. She had just come home from her shift at the community health center. The sun was hot, groceries heavy in her arms, her feet aching. She noticed the envelope sticking out of her mailbox, tucked at an odd angle. The return address read, East Ridge Homeowners Association. Her shoulders sagged before she even opened it. HOA letters never carried good news. Inside, under the harsh print of a computer font, the words were sharp. "This notice serves as an official warning. Your property has been found in violation of community guidelines due to unauthorized modifications to exterior decor. Failure to comply may result in fines or further action." Danielle read it twice, then looked up at her porch. The potted plants were the same as always. The wooden bench had sat there for years. The only new addition was the sunflower flag. She flipped through the community handbook that evening. Page by page, flags were allowed, it said, as long as they weren't offensive, political, or commercial. A sunflower was none of those. When Anthony came home in uniform, she handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening. "They can't be serious. This flag doesn't break any rule." Danielle exhaled. "That's what I thought. But look at the tone of this letter. It's not about a flag. It feels like something else." Anthony tried to laugh it off. Maybe Whitman just hates flowers. But Danielle didn't laugh. Deep down, she knew Gerald Whitman, the HOA president, had been watching her house longer than anyone else's. His golf cart always slowed at their curb. His eyes always lingered. And she knew, he never treated their white neighbors with this kind of scrutiny. Later that night, Danielle called her friend Trisha Owens, who lived 2 streets over. "Did you get a letter about porch decor?" she asked. Trisha chuckled. "No." "Why?" Danielle explained. Trisha groaned. "Girl, Gerald's been targeting folks one by one. Last month, he told the Lopez family their welcome mat was too distracting. But I'll be honest, he always saves the harshest words for families that don't look like him." Danielle pressed her lips together. She thought of her kids, already noticing the way some neighbors treated them differently. She thought of the flag outside, bright, harmless, hopeful. It was never just about flowers. While Danielle tried to brush off the unease, across the neighborhood a very different conversation was taking place. Inside the stucco home at the end of a cul-de-sac, Gerald Whitman sat with 3 other board members of the East Ridge HOA. The curtains were drawn, the iced tea was poured, and the letters to Danielle were stacked neatly on Gerald's glass coffee table. Gerald cleared his throat, holding one of the papers aloft. "She's ignored 2 notices. That's not just negligence. That's defiance. If we let this slide, we lose control. Next thing you know, flags everywhere, sports teams, slogans, political nonsense. Order will collapse." Marjorie Klein, a woman in her 60s who had served on the board for years, frowned. "Gerald, it's a sunflower. Not a protest banner. Are we really going to escalate this? Gerald's lips pressed thin. It's not about the flower, Marjorie. It's about what it represents. If she thinks she can ignore the rules, others will follow. Richard Hale, another member, nodded reluctantly. The handbook was written for a reason. We can't pick and choose when to enforce it. Gerald leaned forward, voice lowering into a conspiratorial tone. We've already given her 2 chances. Now we involve the police. Marjorie's eyes widened. The police? Over a flag? That'll make us look ridiculous. Gerald's mouth curled into a smug smile. Not if we word it correctly. We don't say flag. We say hostile. We say refuse to comply. We say possible disturbance. That way it isn't about decor. It's about community safety. Silence fell over the room. Even Richard shifted uncomfortably. You mean exaggerate, he said. I mean, Gerald replied smoothly, frame it in a way that ensures action. We've all seen how these things go. Certain families push the limits more than others. If we don't set boundaries, we'll lose this neighborhood. The unspoken words hung thick in the air, certain families. Everyone at the table knew exactly who Gerald meant. Finally, Marjorie shook her head, disgust clear on her face. You're playing with fire. People already whisper you target families of color. If this backfires, it won't just be on her, it'll be on us. Gerald set the letter down with finality. Then don't let it backfire. Stand united. 1 complaint, 1 report. Let the authorities handle the rest. He glanced out his window, where the faint flutter of Danielle's sunflower flag could still be seen from a distance. His jaw tightened. This isn't about flowers. It never was. The patrol car rolled slowly down East Ridge Lane, its lights off but its presence impossible to miss. Curtains shifted. Blinds twitched. A dozen sets of eyes watched as the cruiser pulled up in front of the Mortons' house. Danielle was chopping vegetables in the kitchen when her daughter Kira came rushing down the stairs. Mom, there are cops outside. Danielle's heart thudded once, heavy. She wiped her hands on a towel, forced herself to move calmly, and walked to the door. Through the glass panel, the same 2 officers stood waiting, Officer Grant tall and composed, Officer Delgado stiff with unease. The knock came again. 3 deliberate thuds. Danielle opened the door just enough to step into the frame. Good afternoon, officers, she said evenly. Back again? Grant cleared his throat. Ma'am, we need to follow up. The HOA reported continued noncompliance and hostile behavior. Danielle crossed her arms. Hostile? Did they tell you what I did? Did they mention that I've never once spoken to them in person? That all I've received are letters taped to my door? Delgado's eyes darted toward the flag fluttering harmlessly on the porch. He shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable. Grant pressed on. They claim you've been aggressive when contacted. Danielle's laugh was sharp. Aggressive? Officers, the only thing I've raised around here is my children. And yet somehow, a black woman standing on her own porch is being written up as a threat. The silence between them was thick. Delgado finally muttered, almost to himself, doesn't look hostile to me, and then the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from inside the house. Lieutenant Anthony Morton stepped into view, still in his dark blue police uniform. His badge gleamed in the afternoon light. What's going on here? He asked, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to giving orders. Both officers stiffened instantly. Recognition flickered across their faces. Lieutenant Morton, Grant said carefully. Anthony raised an eyebrow. Yes. And you are? Grant swallowed. Grant, sir. This is Delgado. We received a call from the HOA. They said there was an issue. Anthony gestured toward the flag. An issue with that? A sunflower? That's what you're standing at my door for. Neither officer answered. Their shoulders had straightened, their tone had softened. The shift was obvious, and Danielle felt the sting of it deep in her chest. They respected the badge. Not her. She stepped forward, voice firm. Tell me the truth. If my husband hadn't walked out just now, would you be treating me the same way? Or would you still be standing there, waiting for me to prove I wasn't hostile? Grant's jaw worked silently. Delgado lowered his gaze. Anthony's voice cut through. My wife has been harassed by this HOA. They've escalated a harmless flag into a police matter. That's not law enforcement, that's intimidation. And I won't have it weaponized against my family. The officers exchanged a glance. Finally, Grant nodded stiffly. We'll make a note in the report, sir. Danielle folded her arms tighter. And what about them? What happens when people file false reports just to paint families like mine as a threat? Neither officer had an answer. Because they both knew, tomorrow, another call could come. And the word hostile would be waiting again. By the next morning, word had already spread. Danielle didn't need to log onto the neighborhood Facebook group to know it. She could feel it in the way people slowed their cars as they passed her house, in the way blinds cracked open just enough to reveal curious eyes. The sunflower flag had gone from cheerful decoration to silent scandal overnight. At the grocery store, a neighbor she barely knew stopped her in the aisle. I heard the cops had to come to your place, the woman whispered, as if Danielle had caused a crime. Is everything okay? Danielle forced a smile. Yes. Everything's fine. It was just a flag. The woman nodded stiffly, unconvinced, and walked away. That evening, Anthony scrolled through his phone, shaking his head. Look at this, he said, handing it to Danielle. On the neighborhood Facebook page, comments flooded beneath a vague post. Glad the police handled the situation on East Ridge yesterday. Some people think they're above the rules. Dozens of replies spiraled into an argument. One neighbor wrote, rules are rules. If the HOA says take it down, just take it down. Another fired back, it's a sunflower. Are we seriously calling the police for flowers? A third chimed in, maybe it's not about the flag. Maybe it's about who is flying it. Danielle's chest tightened as she scrolled. Some people defended her openly, others attacked her, but the ugliest comments came from those who didn't name race yet dripped with it anyway. Certain people always act like the rules don't apply to them. Funny how it's always the same families causing trouble. She slammed the phone down. They're not even subtle. Anthony rubbed his temple. This is what Gerald wanted. He didn't just call the cops on you, he set the stage so the whole neighborhood would pick sides. Danielle exhaled shakily. Then maybe it's time I speak for myself. I'm not going to let him write my story. That night, she sat at her laptop and began typing a public post. To our neighbors, some of you may have seen police at our home yesterday. Here is the truth. They were called because of a sunflower flag. The HOA reported me as hostile, even though no one has spoken to me directly. I want you to know, I am not hostile. I am not dangerous. I am a mother, a wife, a neighbor. I am a black woman living in a community that should feel safe, but too often does not. If a flag can bring police to my door, what will be next? She hesitated only a moment before hitting post. Within minutes, the notifications began. Some messages were supportive. Thank you for telling your side. Others were hostile. Stop playing the race card. And in between, dozens of neighbors watched silently, saying nothing, but clicking, scrolling, reading. By midnight, Danielle sat staring at the screen, her heart heavy but steady. The silence had cracked. The truth was out, and in that moment, she realized, this fight wasn't about convincing everyone. It was about refusing to be silent anymore. The HOA called it an emergency meeting for community harmony. But everyone in East Ridge knew exactly what it was about. The rec center was packed that evening. Folding chairs scraped across the linoleum floor, neighbors fanned themselves with the agenda sheets, whispers filled the air. At the front of the room sat Gerald Whitman, posture stiff, papers stacked neatly in front of him like ammunition. Danielle sat near the middle, Anthony beside her. Kira and Marcus were at home, but she could feel their eyes in her mind, watching her every move. She told herself she had to show them something more powerful than fear. Gerald cleared his throat into the microphone. Neighbors, recent events have brought unwanted attention to our community. The HOA exists to preserve order and harmony, but when residents refuse to comply, we all suffer. Rules are rules. Without them, there is chaos. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some nodded. Others folded their arms. Danielle stood. Her heart thudded, but her voice was steady. Mr. Whitman, may I respond? Gerald hesitated, then gestured stiffly. Briefly. Danielle turned to face the crowd. Neighbors, you all saw police cars outside my home last week. Let me tell you why they came. Not because of violence. Not because of danger. Not because of chaos. They came because of this. She pointed toward a photo of the sunflower flag, displayed on her phone. She held it up for the room to see. A ripple of laughter, uneasy, ran through the crowd. This flag, this harmless, cheerful flag, was reported as a violation. And worse, I was reported as hostile. That word didn't come from me. It came from a man who has never once spoken to me directly, but who felt empowered to paint me as a threat. Gerald shifted in his seat, face reddening. Mrs. Morton, the HOA handbook clearly states, the handbook says flags are permitted unless they are political or offensive, Danielle cut in. So I'll ask all of you, since when is a sunflower political? Since when is yellow offensive? A few neighbors clapped softly. Patricia Gomez, holding her baby in the back, raised her voice. She's right. We've all seen rules bent before. But funny how the harshest penalties always land on the same families. Gerald slammed his palm on the table. Order. This meeting is not a debate about race. Danielle turned slowly back toward him, her eyes unflinching. Then why is it always families like mine who get labeled as hostile? Why does a black woman with a flag get police at her door, when others get a polite reminder? If this isn't about race, then explain the double standard. The room erupted. Some shouted in agreement, others groaned, but no one was silent now. Anthony rose to his feet. As a police officer, let me be clear, when a report labels someone as hostile, officers prepare for conflict. That one word could have changed everything. If I hadn't walked out in uniform that night, who knows how my wife would have been treated? This is not just an HOA issue. This is about how power gets weaponized. The weight of his words settled over the room. Neighbors shifted, uncomfortable, but many nodded slowly. Gerald's voice cracked with forced composure. We are here to maintain order, Lieutenant. No, Danielle said firmly. You are here to maintain control. And there is a difference. The silence that followed was electric, and in that silence, the balance shifted. The meeting ended in chaos. People streamed out of the rec center in clusters, some whispering angrily about Danielle, making it about race, others shaking her hand, thanking her quietly for speaking up. Gerald stayed seated at the table long after the room emptied, his face tight, his plans unraveling. Back home, Danielle sat on her porch steps, the sunflower flag stirring gently in the desert breeze. Anthony lowered himself beside her, still in plain clothes this time, his hand brushing hers. The night was warm, but her skin prickled with the weight of what had just happened. You realize, Anthony said softly, you didn't just defend yourself tonight. You changed the conversation. You put it out there where no one can ignore it. Danielle nodded, her eyes fixed on the flag. I had to. Because this was never just about me. If they can call the cops on me for a sunflower flag, they can do it to anyone who looks like me. And not everyone will have a husband in uniform to shift the balance. She thought of families who might not have the words, or the badge, or the platform. She thought of her daughter Kira's question, are we going to move? And she thought of the answer she had given, no. We belong here. The next morning, Danielle wrote one final message to the neighborhood group. It was longer than her last, measured but unflinching. Neighbors, thank you to those who supported me. To those who questioned me, I ask you this, if a black woman with a flower flag is reported as hostile, what does that say about us as a community? The measure of harmony is not silence, it is fairness. The measure of order is not fear, it is respect. If we want East Ridge to be more than manicured lawns and perfect sidewalks, we must be willing to look at ourselves honestly. We must stop weaponizing rules against families who already carry heavier weights. We must stand together, not in whispers, but in truth. The post went viral far beyond East Ridge. Shared to city forums, then statewide groups, it sparked debate in living rooms and council chambers. Strangers messaged Danielle, thanking her for saying what they'd always wanted to say but were too afraid to put into words. And yet, she knew the fight wasn't over. Gerald would regroup. The HOA would try again. Silence was easier than change, but Danielle also knew this. Silence was never safety. That evening, she gathered with neighbors who had reached out, Patricia, the Lopez family, even Marjorie from the board who had broken ranks. They sat in her living room, voices low but determined. We can't let this stop with just one flag, Patricia said. We need to push back together. Danielle nodded, feeling the weight transform into resolve. Then let's do it. For our families. For every family that's ever been told to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. She looked once more at the sunflower flag outside, glowing gold in the setting sun, then she turned back to the group. This is bigger than me. This is about who gets to belong, and who gets silenced. And I'm done being silent. Through what seemed like a small incident, a sunflower flag, Color is Not a Crime wants to share this message with you. To every black family who has ever been told they don't belong, you do. You always have. To every neighbor who chooses silence, silence is never neutral. Silence sides with the oppressor, and to every community across America, justice does not begin with strict rules, but with fairness. It does not begin with silence, but with courage.